Frankly, especially coming out of last season, people, commentators, those people associated with our sport, believe that aesthetically, competitively, from an entertainment standpoint, the game has never been better.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of SBJ's On Stage. I'm your host, Taylor Bloom, and we have another great conversation in store for you this week with NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman. This conversation took place on March 5th, 2025 at SBJ's Tech Week in New York City. Bettman was interviewed by SBJ's senior writer, Joe Lemire. As the NHL hits new revenue highs and rolls out innovations in technology and media, Bettman reflected on the league's evolution from puck and player tracking to the future of the draft and what's next for hockey's global business. It's a conversation with one of the longest-serving and most influential commissioners in modern sports. Let's go on stage.
Thank you to the Commissioner. Thank you for being here as we start off Tech Week.
Thank you.
If you do have questions, make sure you enter them in the app. They'll show up here. I'll try to work in as many as I can, and not just at the end, but throughout. So hockey, if I may say so for an ice-based sport, is very hot right now. Between the Four Nations, the Stadium Series with over 90,000 in attendance. I know on CNBC this morning you were talking about over $7 billion projected in revenue this year. What do you attribute that success right now, and what's been sort of the top line business objective for you this spring?
You know, when you ask, first of all, it's great to be here with everybody. When you ask, what do you attribute that to? It's never one thing. I think we have been focused for as long as I've been at the NHL on growing our fan base, on making sure that our game is as attractive as it can be. And frankly, especially coming out of last season, people, commentators, those people associated with our sport, believe that aesthetically, competitively, from an entertainment standpoint, the game has never been better. And everything we do around the game starts with the game, and we don't gimmick the game to try and build audience. We try and connect with our fans, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, but it has to do with our media partners, Disney, Walt Disney Company, ESPN, and Turner, TNT in the States, Rogers in Canada. They've been doing an incredible job of promoting what we have and using technology, using digital platforms, social media, and creating more and more data within the game. We've been able to connect with fans of all ages in ways that we've never been able to do it before.
Mm-hmm. You know, the Four Nations in particular stood out, you know, especially a terrific final, U.S. versus Canada. So I have to ask, what's the greater threat to U.S.-Canadian relations, the tariffs or the Kachucks?
The Kachucks were great, and one of the two of them actually plays. Brady plays for the Ottawa Senators. The tariffs, I hope, and I said this morning on CNBC, I hope it's just a moment in time. These are two great countries, Canada and the U.S. We, compared to the other three majors, have a much greater presence in Canada. The relationship between Canada and the U.S. has always been strong allies, very important to each other. But the tariffs, if they impact the Canadian economy the way some think they might, and that has a depressing effect on the relationship between the Canadian dollar and the U.S. dollar, that's going to create some issues for us, particularly because our players, whether they're playing for a Canadian team or a team in the United States, are paid in U.S. dollars.
This is obviously primarily a tech conference, so we'll shift gears now. And you know, first of all, it's worth noting and commemorating 32 years, the longest tenured commissioner in U.S. Major sports. When during that timeline did you realize, hey, I really need to lean into technology? When and why did you embrace it? And obviously we see now the Apples and the Amazons are all aligned.
Well, you know, it's interesting. So I started in 1993. No leagues had websites. That wasn't the thing. People were just really starting to use email. Social media didn't exist. In fact, we were probably a few years away from using BlackBerries. Maybe there are people in here not old enough to remember them. And then I don't think the iPhone was introduced to the market until my 11th year as commissioner. And we had been focused on, again, how do we build our fan base? How do we connect? How do we provide more to our fans than just the games themselves, which is what particularly now Gen Zs and Gen As want. And so it was an evolution, and I always believed it was our responsibility to be forward-looking and agile to make sure that we were focused on developments as they unfolded. And then if you look over the last few years, whether it was puck and player tracking, which we call NHL Edge, or digitally enhanced dashboards, again, we were trying to innovate, understanding that technology would give us more capabilities to take people inside the games in which we didn't have that before. And you couple that with, we have 10 technology partners, whether it's Verizon or AWS or Apple or ServiceNow or SAP. I mean, and so having that many partners gives us the ability to be agile and be forward thinking and looking, because when you have that many partners, you get a sense of what they're doing and the things that are important to them to move their businesses forward.
Mm-hmm. And innovation is never linear, and you have to be willing to take risks. And so I wonder, was the FoxTrack Glowing Puck a little too early?
Well, it was primitive. The idea was right. David Hill deserves a great deal of credit for doing that. And what I don't think most people realize is, while it didn't work for us because the technology wasn't advanced enough to keep the puck covered with the dot, or the dot covering the puck, that was the precursor to the 1st and 10 line in football. And so that was at the very infancy of trying to bring technology into enhancing the fan experience.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the puck and player tracking, and that certainly has been a major milestone. That's sort of a bedrock for a lot of the new experiences we see now. How does that continue to evolve? If I'm not mistaken, there's been a lot more camera involvement as opposed to just the sensors on the players and puck.
Yeah, well, there's a lot more. There are probably a dozen cameras to enhance what we do with the chips. And so what we're trying, well, two things. One, puck and player tracking didn't emerge overnight. It took us the better than 5 years and more money than I think I've ever told the owners to figure out how you could embed something in the puck that could actually be tracked. And then putting the chips on the player was a lot easier, but that was more dot-like. And so we then needed the cameras to make it more real for stick and skeletal motion. And so that has been the evolution with that, with doing puck and player tracking. So what's this all about? We're creating more and more data. People can get inside the game. How far are players skating? How fast are they going? How fast is the puck traveling? Where are people on the ice when relative to each other and relative to the net and the goaltender when they're taking shots? This has given insights not just to fans who want more, but it's also being used within the game. That's why we have iPads on the bench, players looking at video, coaches looking at video in real time. That's how we've been able to enhance a video review. And we've been able to take it the next step further. When you see us doing multiverse animated games, which is particularly good for young people, we're only able to do that because we can track everything that's going on in the game in real time.
And actually, there a little bit of news on that front. Just within the hour, you announced that you had those successful Big City Greens Classics the past 2 years. This year, it's a slightly different approach. I think there are 7, but roughly a half dozen more regional. I thought it was also particularly noteworthy. One of the animated broadcasts going to be in Spanish for the first time. How have you been able to reach new audiences?
Well, we're trying to make this as economically and technology efficient as possible. So clubs are doing multiverse. We're also going to be doing a highlight show for kids where we'll be taking portions of games and on a regular weekend basis, put it out there for young people to connect with the game. And so what this gives us is the ability to depict our game in many other ways and to have more cameras, ISO cameras. One of the things we'll be doing with Alex Ovechkin's chase is having an ISO camera. I don't know if this is public yet, so it is now.
It is now.
It is now. And so you'll be able to focus solely on him as we get closer to him breaking, which is not assured, but likely, Wayne Gretzky's goal-scoring record. Again, these are ways we take the game, which I said early on is probably in the best shape it's ever been in. You know, you look at the speed, the skill, the agility of our players and what they do. You look at our competitive balance. You look at how entertaining the game is. To be able to connect with people on their terms, now, people my age, you're going to sit back on the couch and watch the way I've been watching for 70 plus years. But for people who are younger and want a different experience, whose attention spans are a little bit different, this makes us more relevant and more compelling.
Yeah, I know the Big City Greens, the data that got shared with me was the average age, depending on the platform, is all preteens. And also notably that whereas most hockey games, I was told, was about 60% male, 40% female, it was actually flipped for that. So now that you've exposed and reached new, how do you retain them? Obviously, you're not going to have an animated broadcast for every game. How do you keep the momentum going?
The view is if you haven't been a hockey fan, you've been a sports fan, we're going to entertain, we're going to amuse you, we're going to have content that's compelling. You're going to want to know more. You're going to want to know who our players are, what they do, how they work out, what they eat for lunch. This is all of the content that all of us in the sports business need to be providing because that's what younger fans are demanding. But also going to your point, and whether it's Four Nations or whether or not it was a Stadium Series game in Columbus, if people are casually looking at you who've never done it before and they go, this is pretty good stuff, I want more of it, we can give it to them on their terms and hopefully they'll tune in. Remarkably, or not surprisingly, our ratings in the last week and a half have been up double digits because more people have figured out who we are and why we're really good to be a part of.
Mm-hmm. And continuing with the idea of the young audience, I know you have a strong presence on Roblox, maybe not personally, but as a league.
Not personally, but actually I think we're the #1 sport on Roblox. Again, looking for ways to connect people who might not either understand the game or be really avid fans to say, this is really good stuff, I want more of it.
Yeah.
So it's a combination of content creation, and we now, because of the data we accumulate, we can create more content and making it more readily available.
Mm-hmm. And certainly has been working of late. So to shift gears a little bit, the other newsy item, all this year, your officials have been wearing Apple Watches, and it was particularly shared in front of about the Stadium Series, but it gives haptic updates about the end of penalties, the end of periods, allows them to not be distracted, not be looking for a clock. How did that come together, and what's it like working with a partner like Apple and Presidio? That
we have had great collaboration with Apple, starting with the iPads on the bench, and our coaches use it to see whether or not they want to challenge and have a video review. The players will look at it in real time during a game to see during shifts what happened and what they could do better or what actually worked. And Presidio created the app for the Apple Watch, And the concern was, our officials never have a home game. Every building's a little bit different in terms of where the clocks are. This became particularly important this past weekend in Columbus because when we're doing an outdoor game, that is a completely new environment, and not having to look at their watches or look for a clock to see when a penalty is expiring, when the period's ending, we think makes them better at their job. So using Apple with iPads, with Apple Watches, it enables our players and our coaches to do a better job and enables our officials to be more efficient and do a better job. And here we're using technology to enhance how well our personnel on the ice at amazing speeds are performing.
Mm-hmm. And right now it's primarily for timekeeping, but I know in other sports, if I'm not mistaken with soccer, with VAR, that they'll get a notification on the watch that there should be a review, and it sort of leads to like an Apple Watch can do a lot more. So I'm wondering, how far does this go? Where do you continue to develop?
We'll continue to experiment. It can tell the officials who actually committed a penalty, who's in the penalty box. That's also important because it keeps us from having accidents and collisions on the ice because the officials can be more present. And I also think you'll see more technology in terms of player biometrics and how well they're performing, who is apparently more tired than they believe they are, and getting them off the ice. Again, because of the speed of our game, the ability to communicate with respect to the data that's happening on the ice and around the ice makes the game better.
Mm-hmm. And then I'm fascinated by this larger concept of automated officiating in certain doses. We've got Major League Baseball's testing the automated strike zone right now. The NBA's trying to automate some goaltending. Certainly tennis has fully embraced it. What do you think about that idea of trying to make more binary decisions through the use of technology?
Most of our calls are judgment calls. And, and we talked about more cameras, which Hawkeye gives us, which has made our video review better. Whether or not there was a hook or a hold or goaltender interference, I'm not sure technology is ever going to be able to take the human element as to that aspect of the game out. And I'm not sure we want to take all the human elements out of the game. However, something like offsides and high sticking in terms of where the puck was touched, those are things that we may be able to do better using not just, the Apple Watch or the Hawkeye system, but even using artificial intelligence in terms of recreating situations. So we will continue to evolve, and we're not afraid to try new things. With Verizon, we have a technology lab at the Prudential Center in New Jersey, and we're going to continue to work with our 10 partners to look for ways that what they do can enhance the game in terms of how it's played and also the connection for our fans.
I know Verizon was a big part of the original Tech Innovation Summit at a game at the Prudential Center a few years ago, and now you have this facility, which I know is very new. What's sort of the goal? What are sort of the things you can work on in the lab?
Well, all the things that we've been talking about, how we can use the technology that's available, the creation of data, how we process the data. What Verizon's also been doing for us is creating Wi-Fi systems, private systems in the building as we're moving all this data around, as we're moving the video around, as the coaches and players are reviewing it, how we get data in and out of the arenas and how we use it in the arena, they're an essential part of that.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned AI, and I think this might be a record that we've gone 20 minutes of a conference for the first reference to AI. For the use of maybe in an officiating use case, but I assume there's probably been a lot of thought going into putting it into back-end business operations. What has the league been?
From a business standpoint, how we're interacting with fans, how we're selling tickets, how we're scheduling games most efficiently. From a rating standpoint and an attendance standpoint. On a Tuesday night when it's raining, what can we expect to do? What's the best matchup for a national game on a Saturday night? These are all the things that we've used technology and created data, but I think AI is going to make us much better at processing simple things like, not so simple, how we create the schedule. We schedule, over 1,300 regular season games, looking at building availability, looking at traffic patterns to get people in and out of games. These are all things that I think AI are going to make us better at.
Yeah, that's great. A question that just came in. Can you share an inside look at what the process is like working with the league's tech partners from start to finish? How is a potential tech integration brought up, either as an enhancement or to fix an issue, and then eventually tested and ideally implemented?
That's a great question, and when we talk about the evolution over the time I've been doing sports, used to be when you had business partners, you'd sell them an official sponsorship and they'd slap, official whatever of whatever league. We are so far past that for sponsors, whether they're tech sponsors or, retail or product sponsors, it's about activation. And so when we engage with a tech sponsor, it's how is it what you do, how is it something that we can activate together around our game? And so it's a collaborative process where we're pushing and pulling and tugging at each other to think about ways that our game can be part of what they're doing and what they're doing can be part of our game. I always believed, it was in the video, so I'm repeating myself, the game's got to be good fundamentally. And you don't change the game for the technology. What you do is use technology to enhance the game and to connect more people with the game, whether it's the players, the coaches, or our media partners, or our fans.
Mm-hmm. And I know the New York Islanders a few months ago announced an AI partner, and there's a wide range of ways they want to approach it. But I know one of which, and there's a question here about this, about queuing and wait time and maybe concession availabilities. Is that how much would the league try to work with the clubs, or do the teams try to, in the arena operators, do those on their own?
Yes. Each club, has its own relationships and does its own thing, but we at the league level try to create solutions that we can give to the clubs that will make them more efficient. So it's really a combination of both. And it's also about best practices. Some clubs are better at breaking the code than others. And when they have a tech partner do something locally, particularly with concessions and ticket sales and egress and entry, then other clubs will copy. And there's nothing wrong with that. And we, again, try to create solutions at the league level that we can hand off to the clubs. Mm-hmm. Because both in terms of efficiency and investment, we have more resources league-wide than any individual club does. So it makes sense for us to try and help the clubs do some of the things they want to be better at.
Sure. And I've seen a lot of leagues bring a lot more innovation in-house, whether it's through a formal startup accelerator type program. How much do you foresee bringing more startups on board that way, or continuing with the technology lab and some of the larger partners you already have?
Well, the technology lab and what we actually restructured and have an innovation group, and their job is to be looking for these opportunities and to try and bring them for us to use, either in-house or through a partner. There's no one-size-fits-all on any of these issues or any of these questions. I think you have to have your eyes open. You have to be in a position to have people who are thinking about this stuff every day, and you have to be agile enough and willing enough to have a failure to try these things.
Mm-hmm. One of the other big partners, AWS, helped you with the first fully cloud-produced game last year. And how important of a milestone was that for efficiency of cost and sustainability, but also as a backstop? And I know your RSN situation isn't the same as other sports, but as a fail-safe.
Well, producing a game on the cloud is more efficient from an environmental standpoint, a manpower standpoint, a financial standpoint, not having to do all the things that you do to initiate a local broadcast in every arena. So we did it I think it was last March. I think we were the first sport to actually do an end-to-end broadcast. That's the wave of the future. I mean, that's the way everybody's going to be producing games. And we weren't afraid to try it, and it actually worked. And we'll be doing more and more of it because it just makes sense.
Sure. And, I know that was also produced, there was a very data-driven altcast that was, a second option. We mentioned earlier a lot about the animated one for the younger generations, but whether it's a hardcore fan or, how many different, if you're producing in the cloud, if you're producing on streaming.
No limit.
Yeah.
There's no limit. You can have altcast, you can have different commentary, you can have people ultimately choose what they want to watch. I'm talking about the Ovechkin ISOCam. The fact of the matter is, a fan can decide any player at any time once this is all up and running. One of the beauties of streaming as opposed to linear is it's limitless as to what you can put out there and what is accessible ultimately for fans. And that's where I think it's ultimately going.
Mm-hmm. So we've been talking a lot about the fan experience at home. How about in the arena? What's the arena of the future look like? The
arena of the future is there's going to, you see larger, more compelling video boards than you've ever seen. If you think back to sports, when I was a kid, went to the old Madison Square Garden, and there was no video board. Frankly, in those days, it wouldn't have mattered because by the end of the first period, there was a cloud of smoke covering the board. I mean, this is how times have changed. But fans are going to want more. And, you go to a game now, everybody's got a dual experience. They're watching live action, and they're on their phones. And they're going to want to be able to see replays. They're going to want to be able to bring up data. They're going to want to have questions that they may have historically or currently answered. And so the in-arena experience is going to be more interactive, which is why, Verizon having the capability to put 5G and beyond into every arena is going to be vitally important, because you don't want to go to a game anymore where you can't download stuff or upload stuff as part of your Instagram experience or your TikTok experience. So again, while many of us are comfortable to sit at a game and take it all in, the fact is younger people, more tech-oriented people, are going to want to enhance the in-person experience. I don't think there'll ever be a substitute for the in-person experience, but people are going to want to be able to enhance it on their terms, which means we've got to be creating the data, the highlights, the other events happening around the game or at other games in real time. Otherwise, fans aren't going to be as engaged.
Mm-hmm. And we've seen a lot of talk across all sports about mixed-use developments. How much do you try to, as you say, enhance that live experience with before and after, and try to encourage the franchises to pursue that?
Sports, all entertainment now is experiential in ways that it hadn't been past. These districts that are created around arenas, whether it's retail or dining or bars or what have you, people want to come and be completely immersed in what they're doing. And frankly, with ticket prices the way they are in all sports, you want the complete experience. It's the same reason that in Columbus, we had OAR entertaining before the game. We had 21 pilots during the game. It's all about, and it's a very competitive landscape, creating the best possible experiences. Some of what we do as a tentpole event, and some of it is what people are going to want to create in conjunction with what they're experiencing by being connected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I went to the previous year's Stadium Series and saw the Jonas Brothers, which I was able to check off that list. The NHL Draft was in the Sphere. What was the undertaking like there? Obviously, a massive amount of technology available to you, only so much you can really sort of program, but how would you assess how that went?
It was great. I don't know how many people here saw it, but the 3D experience, the Sphere. The Sphere is amazing. I mean, I hope everybody who's here has either been there or will go there. Very expensive and very complicated to put on. I believe, again, in another first, we were the first ones to do a live show out of the Sphere. We weren't afraid of failure. Part of the reason we did it is we're changing the nature of the draft. Our clubs, in part probably because of how technology-driven even the draft is, our clubs decided, instead of what we historically did, which was have all the clubs with all their people on the draft floor, they want to stay home, have their own situation rooms, have their own interactive events with their fans locally. So we're going to have a centralized draft, kind of the way the NBA and the NFL do it now. We'll have the prospects there, but instead of the teams coming up and announcing their own picks, I'm going to have to do it, which wasn't something that I was looking to do, but it tells you that our clubs are focused on the business that they have to do at home and the number of people that are now involved in making draft decisions. Will they be better off? Will they like it? It'll be an experiment, but we figured the old style draft should go out with a bang, which is the reason we did it at the Sphere and made it a big event.
Yeah, no, and it was great to see for sure. And the Sphere is, as immersive as it gets. We've seen whether it's a COSM. There's a lot more immersive places to watch sports. Headsets are becoming more advanced. I think it's probably safe to say that hockey benefited from HD televisions more than any other sport. How do you continue to lean into immersive experiences?
Organizations like COSM, which will create a more 3D up-close experience, again, giving fans the access that they want to the games, is all part of how it's going to evolve. Your point about HD TV, it made a huge difference in terms of watching our game. The wide aspect ratio, the digital sound, better captured the clarity, better captured the speed of our game, and the fact that there's a puck as opposed to a bigger ball. All of those things enhance it. We still, I think, are the most compelling in person. You see that in terms of how engaged our fans are. But it's made a huge step forward to us and has enabled us to make up for some lost time, because the old analog experience wasn't particularly representative of what we are as a game. And so we're in a much better place, which is one of the reasons, going back to one of your first questions, I think you've seen the growth that we've seen over the last couple of decades.
Mm-hmm. And when you look at tracking data across all sports, it's sort of changed the way that people approach tactics. And there was a story, I think it was in yesterday's Washington Post, talking about almost wondering at what point is there maybe too much. I think the primary example, basketball, has become, everyone has their own opinions, but there's certainly more three-point shots and slam dunks, and the game has changed as a result. How do you view how hockey has changed, if much at all, based on the advanced data?
And that's a non-tech question. That goes back to the fact that 20 years ago, roughly, we lost an entire season to get a system that enabled us to have every team, every year, have an opportunity to be competitive. That's why our competitive balance is so extraordinary. We have a hard salary cap, the hardest in sports, and revenue sharing. And while some teams will be managed better than other teams, every team has a chance to compete to get into the playoffs. And once our playoffs begin, anything can happen, and anyone has a shot at the Stanley Cup, which means more of our fans throughout our entire ecosystem are engaged on a regular basis, because no matter who you're rooting for, you think you have a chance. I mean, just look at the races right now, particularly in the East. We're going to have a quarter season stretch run to the playoffs where most teams are still in the hunt. And that's what I think you have to deliver, because, again, it starts with the game on the ice, and our players have never been better, more skillful, faster. Game or league has never been more competitive, and that's what drives fan consumption. Technology gives them the connection and enables them to consume more and more. But you got to bring them to a compelling game to start with.
Absolutely. And my Apple Watch is buzzing at the end of the period here. So everyone, thank you very much to the Commissioner.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of On Stage. If you enjoyed this exclusive conversation, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review and share it with colleagues or anyone who wants an unfiltered look at the strategy behind the NHL's growth. With this conversation with Commissioner Bettman in mind, here's a simple thought starter to leave you with today. How is your org balancing tradition with transformation in the pursuit of growth? I'd love to hear how you're thinking about this, so shoot me a note at tbloom@sportsbusinessjournal.com. We'll be back next week with another exclusive conversation from a leader shaping the future of sports business. Until next time, stay tuned and stay ahead. This is On Stage.